Good afternoon and welcome to this special lunchtime news programme on Britain's historic and momentous decision to leave the European Union. The result was announced early this morning. And within hours, David Cameron resigned as Prime Minister. A victorious Boris Johnson said it was a glorious opportunity for Britain to take back control of its own affairs. The result wasn't welcomed by the markets, though, with the pound plunging and billions wiped off the value of shares. And it could threaten the future of the United Kingdom too. Scotland's First Minister has warned a second independence referendum is, and I quote, highly likely. Our political correspondent Lewis Vaughan-Jones rounds up the dramatic events.
The Prime Minister had asked the country to remain in the EU, but the British people chose instead to leave, and David Cameron said he therefore had to do the same.
I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction. I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Boris Johnson has been at the heart of this campaign to leave the European Union, and he won.
I believe we now have a glorious opportunity. We can pass our laws and set our taxes entirely according to the needs of the UK economy. We can control our own borders. Above all, we can find our voice in the world again.
The celebrations started in the early hours of this morning. The UK had voted to get out of the EU. The official, more sober announcement came just after 7 a.m.
This means that the UK has voted to leave the European Union.
It had all started in Sunderland.
The total number of votes cast in favour of leave was 82,000.
The north of England, the Midlands, Wales all voted to leave. London's support for Remain wasn't enough.
At 4:35, we at ITV News are calling this as a leave victory, an extraordinary moment in British history.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day.
There was a dramatic reaction in the financial markets. Sterling and shares plummeted.
Some market and economic volatility can be expected as this process unfolds. But we are well prepared for this.
And the referendum fallout may spread to Scotland. Here they voted to remain. So now the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said another Scottish independence referendum is on the table.
Well, I think an independence referendum is now highly likely, but I also think it's important that we take time to consider all steps.
Like Scotland, Northern Ireland voted to stay in the EU, and there are now questions about its future.
Scotland have made the argument in the past that in the event of a Brexit that they would go for another referendum. Well, I think that our case for a border poll is also strengthened by the outcome of this vote.
The Labour Party backed Remain. Critics of their leader's performance have tabled a motion of no confidence in him.
There were splits in both parties on this matter. Yes, a considerable number of Labour voters obviously voted to leave. A very much larger number of Conservative voters didn't heed their own party and voted to leave.
The European Commission said now the UK has made its decision, it should leave the EU quickly.
We regret this decision. Personally, I'm very sad about this decision, but of course we have to respect it. This is an unprecedented situation.
So we will soon need a new relationship with the EU, a new Prime Minister. There are questions about the Labour leader's position, Scotland and Northern Ireland's place in the UK, and financial stability. And it's only lunchtime. Lewis Vaughan-Jones, ITV News, Westminster.
Let's get reaction now from our experts across the United Kingdom. Our deputy political editor, Chris Shipp, first. He's there at Downing Street and has been for almost as long as I can remember. David Cameron never expected to be making that speech that you predicted and you witnessed at 20 minutes past 8 this morning.
Absolutely, Alistair. I mean, so much to tell you about in the short time we have here that's happened since 4:30 this morning when we here on ITV announced that this would be a leave vote. Let's start with what happened in the street behind me here with David Cameron. Alistair, you were talking to Lord Heseltine, Michael Heseltine, just before the ad break, and he said to you, the reason we have leaders is to get into power. Well, David Cameron got the Tories into power, first as 5 years as the leader of a coalition government, and then, this time last year, he succeeded in getting a Tory majority against all the odds. Well, a few hours ago, he announced here that he personally would no longer be in power. And the implications of the vote last night are huge, politically, socially, financially, economically, constitutionally. Let's go through them. Politically, well, we've now got a Tory leadership election that's going to start any moment now. We had Boris Johnson making an announcement. He didn't tell us whether or not he'd stand in that election, but the statement he gave today, some people explained, I think Alistair Campbell on this programme said to us that it felt rather like a wake. It was a very sober reaction from Boris Johnson. Straight after him, we had the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, announcing that there would be a second independence referendum. She said it was democratically unacceptable what happened to Scotland last night. There are questions about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. It's been quite an unbelievable morning. And on top of all that, I've heard in the last few minutes that there are some big city firms that have announced that they are going to relocate their headquarters back to Paris. There's only a rumour, but again, it just explains the significance of the votes that we witnessed here last night.
Chris, thank you very much. A rumour that Emily Morgan had also heard in the city about those job moves. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan is outside the Vote Leave headquarters, which Chris Shipp just talked about there. A wake, a funeral. But what do the people there do next, Carl?
Well, as Chris said, they seemed, I mean, it was a very sober event here. They seemed shell-shocked at what they had done. I think the idea was to appear not triumphalist, but really they seemed genuinely sad that David Cameron had gone. Although, of course, Boris Johnson then went on to make a very conciliatory, unifying kind of statement, the sort of statement you would expect from someone who was maybe expecting to run for the leadership of the Tory party. What they want to happen next is informal talks ahead of what's called Article 50 being triggered. Article 50 is something viewers will hear a lot about in the coming months. It's the formal process of Britain leaving the EU. Now, the people here want that to go slowly because they want to protect stability, which, as we've heard, is threatened in the city and elsewhere by keeping the move out of the EU stable and slow. The EU, on the other hand, want to get this done quickly to stop the Eurosceptic contagion spreading. That's the next big battle between slow Brexit and fast.
Carl, thank you very much. Well, the vote has caused shockwaves across the United Kingdom, but perhaps particularly in Northern Ireland and in Scotland, as Lewis Vaughan-Jones reported right at the top of this belt. The majority voted in both of those parts of the United Kingdom to remain. Well, Peter Smith is in Edinburgh, Scotland's First Minister. Nicola Sturgeon indicating another independence vote is now highly likely on the cards. How fast is it likely to move along?
Well, that all depends on what Westminster's response is going to be to Nicola Sturgeon's moves towards a second independence referendum. To put it into context, Alistair, Scotland voted to remain, overwhelmingly to remain. Every one of Scotland's 32 regions voted to remain. But Scottish voters have wakened this morning and been told that they're leaving the European Union. That is democratically unacceptable, according to Nicola Sturgeon, and that's why she's drafting the legislation to hold the second referendum on independence. That has to be presented to Westminster, and Westminster is under no obligation to accept it. We've already heard from the Scottish Conservative leader, Ruth Davidson, that she would be campaigning against the second referendum. There's enough instability just now. We don't need any more. That's what she's saying. Voter fatigue as well is coming into play. Scots have been to the polls 4 times in just 2 years. Do they really need another referendum? But crucially, she's been in touch with Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, potentially trying to form an alliance of pro-EU groups in the United Kingdom.
All right, Peter, thank you very much indeed. And away from the corridors of power and politics into the corridors of money. Our correspondent Emily Morgan joins me live now from the city. Last time we spoke, a few minutes ago, you were saying it was beginning to calm. America due to open. What's it looking like now?
Well, that's exactly right. It's not surprising that things have calmed down a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. There was a dramatic drop in the pound overnight. It went down by 10%, the biggest fall in 30 years. It's since rallied a little bit due to events throughout the day. So when the Prime Minister resigned, when Mark Carney suggested that the Bank of England was ready to pump liquidity into the system, that meant the pound stabilised a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. Shares, though, have also gone down. Construction companies down, big banks down, and retailers down as investors fear that consumers will stop spending. What does this mean for the likes of you and I, though? At the moment, we have to just wait and see. We have to wait for prices to settle before we can draw any real and firm conclusions. The Bank of England will be watching inflation. They could put up interest rates. Petrol prices could go up if importing oil is more expensive, and prices in the shops could also go up, but these are all could. Recession, we just can't say right now.
Emily, thank you very much indeed. Emily Morgan, live in the city. Well, listening to all of that, the former Prime Minister, Tony Blair, who joins me now from his central London office. Good of you to join us, Mr. Blair. One thing struck me over the last few hours, and that is the charge on the table that you and your colleagues in Labour governments for over a decade, and then Mr. Cameron himself for the last 6 years, have got complacent over the merits of the European Union and complacent over the challenge of immigration. And you paid the price for it last night.
There's no doubt that immigration is a huge challenge. It's a challenge everywhere. It's a big issue in the United States. It's a big issue all over Europe. But we're not, I'm afraid, going to resolve it by this vote. And as for the European Union, yes, the European Union desperately needs reform. That's clear. But we're better off inside trying to help reform it than being outside, where we're now going to face a situation where over the coming months and years possibly, we are trying to negotiate the right terms of trade in circumstances where over 4 decades of membership, our economy is now deeply integrated with Europe. So, you know, yes, these are big, big issues, and they're caused by the whole process of globalization worldwide, but the answer to it is not to give up our position in the largest commercial market and biggest political union in the world.
The integrity of the United Kingdom as well. Your fingerprints with Mo Mowlam and Peter Mandelson and others all over the Northern Ireland peace process, and you started a process that enhanced devolution to Scotland, which Mr. Cameron also, to be fair, enhanced. That's on the table now. And you've just heard Martin McGuinness on this programme say, well, you know, maybe we need to have another vote on our borders. It's chaos, Mr. Blair.
Well, I'm afraid some of us did warn that there would be a big impact on the UK because, of course, look, the case for Scotland leaving the UK is very, very weak whilst the UK is part of the European Union. If the UK leaves the European Union, then of course that case becomes completely different because Scotland can say we voted to remain, we want to be part of the European single market and the European political structure. So we're going to have difficulties there. I very much hope Scotland stays part of the UK, but it's a much more tricky argument. And then in respect of Northern Ireland, one of the things that John Major and I tried to highlight in the course of this campaign, and it's going to become a very big practical problem, as so many of these things are. You have free movement of people at the moment between the south of Ireland, which is in the country of the Republic of Ireland, and the north of Ireland, Northern Ireland being part of the UK. Once you separate the UK out of Europe, the border with Europe becomes the south of Ireland. And how are you going to maintain that common travel area between the south and the north? If you don't,
indeed,
you will put big strain on the nationalist community in Northern Ireland.
Indeed so. I apologise for butting in before you'd finished that sentence. Tony Blair, always good to talk to you. Thank you for finding time to talk to us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So, the establishment has been rocked to its core. But this is the will of the people. Democracy at its most vivid. Our correspondents are out and about gauging reaction to the vote. Shuli Gulsh, who is there for us live in Peterborough. Shuli.
Yes, I'm in one of the many Eastern European supermarkets which you can find in Peterborough, which cater to the sizable migrant populations here, the Polish, the Lithuanians, the Latvians, the Slovakians, all with one topic of conversation, the result of the EU referendum and what a leave decision means for them. And not least for owners of this business, Sawir Mustafa, you are from Erbil, but you've been here for 15 years. What did you feel when you realised what the result of the vote was?
Yes, today I felt really disappointed too after yesterday UK voted to leave. I feel as a mistake, as a market is going really quiet, and as a business, as with East European, it can be go down.
And you've actually spoken to a lot of your colleagues and fellow immigrants here, and you've been talking about how this could affect your business.
Yes, since this morning we, as a lot of my friends, but we have the same business. We've been talked to through from the phone. All of us, we are disappointed. We know the future of the business is going lower, going down, which is makes us disappointing and.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Ganita, you're from Latvia. How do you feel?
I feel very disappointed because I was working here for the 3 years. I never claimed any benefit. I was working very hard, and I have like other friends from the Latvia, Lithuania, Russia, Poland, and they as well working hard. And we not come here to claim benefits. We come here for work, and we feel very disappointed.
OK, both of you, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And that really is, you know, some of the sentiment that we've been hearing here. But Peterborough is a city where 61% of the population here did vote to leave. And so that is clearly going to have an impact on the migrant communities here.
Shuli, thank you. Now to Wales and our correspondent Rupert Evelyn, who is in Ebbw Vale. Rupert.
Well, here in Wales, they voted to leave. Wales, of course, is a net beneficiary from EU funding, so they were, in a sense, getting more than they were putting in. Now, you could argue by voting to leave, they voted for a pay cut. One thing for certain is that if they want money in the future, they're going to have to go to Westminster, not Brussels, to get it. That is going to be a difficult negotiation in itself. Now, I want to introduce you to Zoe Powell. Zoe runs a woolen haberdashery just over the road from me here. Zoe, you voted to leave. Just explain to me why.
Simply because our marvellous dragon here, I look on it every day. This was a barren site regenerated, and we've had millions spent in Ebbw Vale, etc. When this was being all regenerated here, the local council closed our public toilets just down the road.
So millions of pounds worth of EU funding going in here.
Yes.
At the same time, the local council couldn't find money to keep the public toilets open. That must have, I guess, driven you mad, didn't it?
It rankled the whole of Blaen y Gwent. They closed every public toilet in Blaen y Gwent. And now we've got these millions, these marvellous works of art, which are fantastic. But now the council tell us there's no money to maintain them. So they are fallen into disrepair.
All right, OK, well, thank you very much, Zoe. Your example is just one of the reasons why people here felt, I think, fed up with the EU. Immigration is a very big issue in this area. There are people or groups of people who are described as people who've been lost by the economy. They're no longer supported by, they feel, by political parties. And it was a real way in which they could vote by saying, do you know what? We've had enough in Wales. You don't support us, and we want change.
Rupert, thank you very much. Well, today's events have caused a political earthquake across the world. The French President François Hollande is calling for an emergency summit following the UK's vote to leave the EU. Monsieur Hollande says negotiations over the UK's exit need to be swift. Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel says that she deeply regrets the vote, calling for a calm and measured response. She said it should be a goal for the European Union to maintain a close future relationship with Britain. Well, our Europe editor, James Mates, joins us live now from Brussels. So, James, we voted to leave. What happens now?
Well, it depends whether you listen to the officials here or to David Cameron and Boris Johnson in London. Here, they want Article 50, the process by which we leave to be triggered immediately. The thing about that is that once triggered, it is irreversible. It has a 2-year deadline, at the end of which you, the member state, whatever agreement may or may not have been done in that ensuing 2 years, you, the member state who've asked to leave, are out. They want us to do that right away. In London, there seems to be some nervousness about triggering that process. In part, I think the reason that they're so keen on us getting on with it at the moment is it's part of a very hard line that they are showing. They are united in saying that let's get on with it, let us get this over, let's get Britain out, because they do not want other countries thinking about similar referendums to be in any way tempted. It's the problem of contagion. It's the problem that France, Belgium, Italy even may want their own referendums, and they are absolutely determined to stop that.
James, thank you. And to Washington now, and our correspondent Robert Moore. Robert, America just waking up. What is the reaction likely to be?
Well, look, it's a big, diverse country. You're going to get different reactions here. We've already heard Donald Trump in Scotland saying it's going to have zero impact on the US-UK relationship. But in reality, in this town this morning, as officials wake up, whether it's at the State Department, the White House or at the Pentagon, there will be significant dismay at the British decision, really for this fundamental reason. I mean, Britain, most importantly, was a liberal, pro-US voice at the table in Brussels. It no longer is that. There will also be concern about cascading instability in other European countries, and indeed potentially the fragmentation of the UK as well. So on multiple levels, this will alarm the kind of US economic, political and national security establishment. I think one way to ask it is this question: when the next international crisis happens, will the president, he or she, will they phone London first or will they phone Berlin first? I think it's no longer obvious that first phone call will be made to Downing Street.
Robert, thank you. And that is all for now on a momentous day for the United Kingdom, for Europe, for the world. On the day it was confirmed that Britain has voted to leave the European Union. It cost David Cameron his job. There'll be a new Prime Minister by October. From all of us here, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.